No, the cricket season started ages ago. But having watched the West Indies demolish Australia in the T20s, play against Sri Lanka, but also disappoint in the one-day internationals, I just had to start my cricket season on cricket 8, cricket 19 again. So I'm starting off with looking at some squads for the 1970s. I'm playing them in T20s and ODIs and mixing and matching different squads from different eras. As you know, I have done a lot of these. The community knows I've done a lot of over 1,000 players in cricket history, particularly Test cricket history, that have played the game for every international side. So I'm just going to quickly run through the 1970s decade, but I've actually done decades for every single team, as you can see here. And sometimes if I see a special squad, then or a specific country's era where the cricket was good or there's an importance to it, I've added it to it as well, as you can see. So I'm going to start off, as I said, 1970s. As Australia are the top team, and they begin with A, I'll start right there, just quickly run through a few of the squads I've got. So Australia during the 1970s were very powerful, very, very powerful, and they were led in the main by the Chappell brothers. The philosophy behind each of these creations, by the way, each of these squads, is no one man can appear in two squads. So even if the career went through 2 decades, I try and put them on 1 decade. For example, Ian Chappell started in the 1960s, as did Rod Waters. They could have been in the 60s side, but because they were more famous for being part of a very rowdy, beer-swilling, aggressive, foul-mouthed Aussie team of the 70s, they go here. So I'll start from the top. I'll quickly run through them. You can see the batsman bowling rating at the top, and you can see Greg Chappell's rated 96. These are obviously editable and adjustable, but I've done used the best of my cricket knowledge. So here we go. So you got Greg Chappell, and these are the artistic representations. Either I've done it, or a colleague of mine or friend has done it, another person in the community's done it. Most of them, about 90% of them, are mine. So I spent like 2 years doing them. And I've done them for previous versions as well. It's a great little hobby, nice and relaxing. I read books while I'm doing it, get as much history as I possibly can. So here we go. So you've got Greg Chappell, leading batsman of the era, definitely one of Australia's beautiful stroke player. Dennis Lillee. Dennis Lillee was a fantastic fast bowler, a tearaway fast bowler in the early 70s. By the mid 70s, I think he had a stress fracture of the back, had to shorten his pace, but actually increased his skill. He is amazing, and he's one half of their pace attack, the other one being Jeff Thomson. Maybe this is not the best representation of Jeff Thomson, but Jeff Thomson, it was a fantastic fast bowler, known in cricket history as, if not the fastest, then the fastest of all time for us. So any American viewers, he'd be kind of like Steve Carlton, only that he's right-handed. That kind of pace. And he had a decent career as well. When I said decent, his average is 28, which for a fast out-and-out bowler is good. Means a little bit expensive, but in his day he was vicious. And with him and Lillian Thompson is a well-known opening fast bowler pairing. Doug Waters was a laid-back kind of Aussie character, a good, excellent batsman. When he'd finish cricket, he'd go in the pavilion, sit down and crack open a beer. That kind of guy, but what an excellent player. Ian Chappell is probably one of the most unpopular players amongst certain people. Certainly Ian Botham, an England legend, can't stand him, so it goes. But Ian Chappell became captain after Bill Lawry was sacked after, I think it was a 1969 India tour, and Ian Chappell took over. He was an opening bat, he loved to hook the ball, very aggressive, but he most importantly led Australia throughout the 1970s. They never won a World Cup. Bear in mind the first World Cup was in 1975. That was one-day internationals. They got to the final. I don't know if he was in that side even, to be honest, but he certainly was around. But he retired relatively early, but then he was brought out of retirement to lead Australia again when they got into World Series cricket, which for the American ones who may not know about cricket, or people around the world who may not know about cricket, in 1977-78, an Australian entrepreneur, larger-than-life, Kerry Packer, decided to form his own league because he had a TV channel called I think it's called TV9 or Channel 9. That's it. And the players weren't getting paid a lot. So he formed his own league. And he enticed some of the greatest players in the world to play in his stadiums, on his pitches. And he revolutionized cricket. Not only did people get paid better, but they started, I think they wore different types of clothing. The one-day game took off. The one with limited overs. It's not Test cricket over 5 days. It is a 1 day, 2 innings, 1 inning each side over a period of overs. It made it very popular. And night cricket with a white ball. And Ian Chappell was very much at the forefront of that. There's a great film called How's That, which you can watch. I think it's on Amazon, definitely on Amazon. And that will tell you all about the World Series cricket era and all about Ian Chappell. Excellent batsman. Then you've got Keith Stackpole. Steve Stackpole was around in the 60s, a middle order batsman, i.e. came at number 3 and number 4, and he would, or 5, and he would hold up innings. Decent player, not world class, but good all the same. As you can see, both ratings of 83. Generally, with the ratings, I take the batting average more or less, because it does change era to era, and I then multiply it by 2, and then I decide where they go up or down. So just by looking at Keith Stackpole, his 83 bats, I can more or less tell you his batting average was around the 40. And in the 1970s, we had a test batting average, or first class average, I should say, of 40. You're a decent batsman. Only a few people in Test cricket history, up until say the last 10 years, had averaged over 50. The most notorious of all being Don Bradman, who has a 99. There's an outlier. There's no one even close. Not even close in Test cricket. First class cricket, again, I think he also heads it at 99. And bearing in mind, Don Bradman would have played about 45 Test matches. That's outstanding. No one's come close. It's like it's like a batter in baseball hitting 400. It doesn't happen. Over a career, it doesn't happen. So he has that. So then you got Trevor Loughlin, who was an all-round player. I saw Trevor Loughlin when I was a little boy, my first Test match. And Trevor Loughlin, he was a Aussie. He wasn't one of the leading Aussies, but as a lot of players left to go to Packer, to play for Packer, he was drafted in. You got Ross Edwards, a keen batsman. Again, you can see the 81. Then you've got Kerry O'Keefe, an outstanding spinner. LS means leg spinner. In those days, they were just kind of dying out, but I think he was one of the last of a certain chain before one Shane Warne came in the 1990s. So Kerry O'Keefe, I remember seeing him at some point. There's another spinner, slow left armer, SLO. His name is John Inverarity. He was a captain of his own state side, as I recall. Then Ashley Mallett, an off spinner. Ashley Mallett was a well-known Aussie player from the 1970s, regular in the team. They had Bob Massey, who was a swing bowler, so not fast, but he would bowl the ball where it would move, left or right. And strange career. I think it was 72. He had a tour of England where he demolished the English batsmen in what is traditionally known as the Ashes. The Ashes being the tournament over 5 tests or 6 tests that England and Australia play every 2 years. 2 years in England, 2 years in Australia. Sorry, 2 years and then another gap for 2 years they play in the opposite country. And Bob Massey is famous for one particular series, and then he fizzled out. But that particular series, he was devastating. Peter Tuohy was a very red-haired batsman, decent batsman, but not top tier, as you can see, 74. Again, averaged probably about 30 in first-class cricket, on Test cricket, which means he was decent enough, but not your world-class performer. He was brought in again during that Packer era. You got Jeff Dimmock. Jeff Dimmock was an underrated left-arm fast bowler. You might want to use him. Good player. Played in the late 70s, early 80s. You got Wayne Clark, another underrated player that played again when the Packer boys left. He was drafted into the Australian team, which played against India, as I recall, in 1977-78, and then also went on to play in the West Indies, where I did see them as a kid. Gary Gilmore was a player, again, from that great Australian team of the mid-70s. Kind of an all-rounder. Played in the 75 World Cup, if I remember correctly. Decent player. Not top rung, but could, do you a decent job, particularly in the one-day game. Len Pascoe. Well, what can you say about Len Pascoe? Len Pascoe is a character. There's not much more I can say about him other than he was fast. Not only fast, but he was reckless with it. He wouldn't be afraid to knock your head off, quite frankly. Then Pascoe is a player that got notorious for playing in what we call World Series cricket, which is the Packer years, and then once Packer was over, which lasted about 2 or 3 years, he then played a lot of World Series cricket, which was really international cricket, just branded World Series, because it was on Channel 9, which is Kerry Packer's channel. Alan Hurst was a decent fast bowler during Australia, on the fringes of the Australian side, decent player. Anthony Mann would have just been a normal, as you can see by stats, a reserve batsman for Australia that would have played in 1 or 2 squads. Paul Sheehan was a talented attacking batsman that probably never hit the heights that he should have. Max Walker, old Tanglefoot, excellent fast bowler, medium fast, aggressive, shirt open, hairy chest. I think Max Walker has passed on now, sadly, but Max Walker was an outstanding medium fast bowler, so not quite top speed, but definitely a valuable member, as you can see by his stats of 87. Mick Malone was again a what we call medium fast bowler, decent bowler again on the fringes of the side. And then you've got a legend of Australia, Rodney Marsh. Rodney Marsh, again, along with the Chappell brothers, Ian and Greg, Jeff Thompson and Lilly, and you had Marsh, and you had Doug Waters. This was the core of the 1970s Australian side. Rodney Marsh was a great wicketkeeper. You know, he'd have to stand back to obviously field the balls from Lilly and Thompson. If you're a baseball fan and you're kind of casually looking at this, he would probably be the Carlton Fisk type, but not quite or probably like a Gary Carter type. He could definitely hit the ball, but he wasn't in the side to hit home runs, sixes and fours, which are like the equivalent of home runs and big shots in baseball. But he definitely could hit the ball when needed. But he was there for more of his leadership skills, his camaraderie, and I think holding the world record for the amount of beers consumed on a flight until a few years later, 20 years later, I think it was a batsman called David Boone, who will come to another time, who broke the record. It's a famous story, you'd have to look it up, and I'll have to revise it again. Then you have a player that caught my eye when I was a young boy, because of his name really, Rick Darling. Rick Darling is one half of what is called the Kamikaze Kids. He was a exciting opening bat, but he had the ability to run himself out or his partner. Never quite hit the heights, Rick Darling, but he's still an aggressive, interesting player. Jim Hicks was a very, very good leg spinner during that time. But again, one underrated, but Australia, as you can see, just loaded with talent. Then you had Craig Sargent, a talented batsman. He came to the West Indies when I was a kid. I definitely remember Craig Sargent as a boy. Good player. Gary Cozy was another one who came at the time. I watched him bat again with a average in the 30s. Not quite world class, but a decent player. Same with David Ogilvie, another right-hand bat, right-hand medium. Interesting story about Gary Cozier, as I recall. I'm sure it was Cozier. When they were doing the Packer, when Kerry Packer was getting those players together in the 70s, he didn't pick Gary Cozier. And of course, Gary Cozier was a teammate of Doug Waters, Dennis Lilly, Jeff Thompson, Greg and Ian Chappell. And he knew something was going on because it all kept secret, you see, because he couldn't let the cricket authorities find out. And he was left out. So you imagine how he felt, especially when they came back. You got Dav Watmore, quite an interesting character. Dav Watmore, I think later on, either played for Sri Lanka, or he managed Sri Lanka or coached them later on. Again, didn't play much for Australia, but just a decent player. And then you've got Sam Gannon, is it? Sam Gannon. Again, don't know too much about him myself, other than he was a decent backup bowler. Then you've got Alan Turner, a decent fielder, played in the 75 World Cup. Terry Jenner. Terry Jenner was, again, another outstanding left spinner. Now, if I remember it is correct, he was the one who taught Shane Warne, who is a legend, how to bowl the leg spin, but I could be wrong. There's so many leg spinners in this squad. Then you got Rick McCosker. Rick McCosker was an opening bat for Australia during the 1970s. Rick McCosker is famous for having his jaw broken, I think, in the Ashes. Was it the Ashes? Or was it World Series cricket? I think it was the Ashes. But he still came in the late 70s, but he still came up to bat with a bandage around his head. If it wasn't the Ashes, it was World Series cricket. But Rick McCosker was an opening batter towards the late 70s. And a decent opening batter at that, but not world class. Ian Davis, again, was on the fringes of the Australian side. And then you've got a gentleman called John McLean, who was a wicketkeeper, reserve. So there you have it. So there's one or two missing, but they're going to be in the 80s team or the 60s team. Like Ian Redpath is one that could have been in either side. I think I've kept him in the 1960s team. So there it is. There's Australia, and that is Australia 1970s. If you look at the lineups, that's more or less how they lined up. Ian Chappell, you can look on Cricinfo. You can, go to archive, go to 1970s, pick any season. It will have the scorecards for pretty much every match that was ever played, one day international or test cricket. Also, if you go to Cricket Archive, which I do subscribe to, again, it has all of these lineups, the position the players played. The difference between the two is that Cricinfo has a bit more of a biography. And if you want to find out more, I definitely highly recommend anything written by Christopher Martin Jenkins. Sadly no longer with us, but an amazing talent. I read his books when I was about 19 years old. He did a profile on every single test cricketer. I've got that book, got loads of his books and articles. But anyway, this is the classic 1970s lineup, possibly missing Redpath. But you can see Ian Chappell at the opening bat and captain, Rick McCosker, they would go out to bat. Then you have stroke players, Greg Chappell, Doug Walters, possibly Keith Stackpole, although you could change him with Paul Sheehan. Then you've got Ross Edwards, another decent batsman there at number 6. At 7, Rodney Marsh. 8, Dennis Lillian. Dennis could swing the bat if needed, but what a bowler. Then you've got Tomo, number 9. Max Walker, Tanglefoot at number 10. And number 11, Ashley Mannett. And then the rest. I could go on and do a one-day lineup if I wanted to, but I am not going to do that today. And then you got the uniforms. I was able to just cobble together this, well, as it says, vanilla. There is nothing to it. I didn't even put the badge on. Yep. However, there is a test jumper that someone created that I nicked and put that on them, which is really the V and a little stripe at the bottom. And then there's a classic World Series cricket. There's the real World Series cricket logo for Kerry Packers. And I kind of use that for every team as a standard because it's quite a lovely, brilliant logo. And then I just put the colours in, and it's kind of designed exactly like it was in reality. Nothing special with my design. And then you've got the stadiums, of course, which I can't show you all of them, but I've assigned, these were built into the game, brilliantly done, by the way, and it's had an update recently. Bearing in mind this is now July, this has had an update to it. So you've got Perth, they've all got different names as well, to be fair. The Gabba, which is probably Brisbane, Adelaide, and every cricket ground has their own special feature. So, for example, Melbourne is huge, and SCG is like the Yankee Stadium sort of thing. These are the two sort of well-known stadiums around the world. Some of them are known for being fast. Some of them are known for a variety of things. So they've all got their own characteristics. You'd have to look up each one. I can't remember precisely which ones are which, other than I know the sizes. I know these two in particular are huge, and they look great in the game. So that is Australia 1970s. If you'd like me to do more, please put a like and a subscribe. If not, feel free to go on to the Cricket Academy of Cricket 19, type in Mousy Dread, and you will find my creations, along with many of my fellow fans of Cricket 19. We do a lot. I've been doing it for a few years now. There's quite a few good ones on there. Waste Your Youth, I would highly recommend Waste Your Youth as a great place to get current people as well. I've got current as well, but he has used a tool on PC, I don't use PC for Cricket 19, to put some of the real faces in. Not for the old players like these, but some of the new ones. But as I said, recently the game has had an update anyway, so a lot of the real faces are in there, except for possibly the Asian ones in the main, like the Indians and the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis and the Afghanis. Although there are some in there because they play cricket in England, so they're for Australia, or in the CPL, which is now a license. So some of them are in there now. So I'll bring that to an end. somehow when I figure out how to stop the broadcast. Bear with me.